My name is Erica Alders. I'm the chairperson of the Warrant Committee. I'm just going to give a brief introduction, and then we're going to go ahead and get started with presentations from the sponsors of the articles that will appear on this year's town meeting warrant. The sponsors each have 8 minutes to present, and then there's going to be a comment period. So if you'd like to speak after the presentation, I'll call for comments and questions. You can approach this microphone and make a line, and everyone can have up to 2 minutes to make their comment. So the open hearing presents the warrant articles for fiscal year 2020 that are going to be voted on at the annual town meeting on May 6th. During the fall and the winter, as always, the warrant committee met with the town departments and the schools to review the proposed budgets and the warrant articles. And the financial amounts that will be presented tonight are preliminary, so the final amounts will be in the blue book. Each year, the warrant committee issues a guidance letter addressed to all town departments at the beginning of the budget season. We have copies of the guidance letter on the back table. You can see some of the points are that the warrant committee strongly suggested that all departments submit level service or reduced expense budgets for FY20. And then if there was an above level service request, they filled out particulars that the warrant committee could review. This is just a general overview of this year's annual town meeting articles. We have 27 articles, 15 are annual or recurring articles, and 12 are special or non-recurring. Of the 15 ones, 4 do not require expenditures, and 11 could have associated expenditures. And of the 12 non-recurring articles, 3 do not require expenditures, and 9 could have associated expenditures. Here you can just see a list of the articles that have associated expenditures or financial implications that are recurring. And here you can see the articles with associated expenditures or financial implications that are non-recurring. And these will all be presented on tonight. Here's a list of the articles without associated expenditures, both recurring and non-recurring. All right, so here's the agenda for tonight. Like I mentioned, each of the sponsors has a presentation prepared for up to 8 minutes, and then after the sponsor's presentation, there'll be an opportunity for comments and questions at the microphone for up to 2 minutes each. We'll hear from Article 4, Article 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then we'll hear from the remaining articles 15, 16, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Andy up to present on Article 4.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. If you can't, just let me know. Erica mentioned we're going to present Article 4 tonight. It's in 3 parts. I've got the part of the town budget, excluding the schools. Then we'll have representatives of Dover Schools to go through the Dover Schools budget. And then we'll have the regional schools present their items as well. So for the first item, just the town overhead budget, I will turn to that now. As I mentioned, we've got 3 parts. I've got each of the separate sections broken up. As you can see, as Erica mentioned, we had requested level service from the town departments, and as the budgets rolled up and came back, that's essentially what we got. The change from year to year is relatively small, period over period. One item of note, in the handouts in the back of the room, there is also a detail for Article 4 of the operating budget. That detail comparison is to the appropriated amount for FY19. The comparison on the slide is to the approved budget at town meeting last year. So there's a slight difference in the variance from year to year, just because they're presented on 2 different bases. But as you can see, the town departments went down 2.9%. Dover Schools down 1.6%. The regional schools, that's the assessment, just the Dover assessment coming back from the regional schools, and it's up 3.9%. And the components of that, the major drivers, basically it can all be distilled down to essentially three things. The increase from the regional schools, that's both the capital component and the operating component that the regional schools discussed with you. Then we've got from the town, most of the decrease is just coming from reduced debt service during fiscal 20. And then the Dover school decrease as well will be discussed by the local schools. The other amount in there is very small, getting you back to the total decrease. So this slide, it's again a companion to the Article 4 handout in the back of the room. It really just breaks down on a percentage basis what the expenditures, the budget expenditures are based on, and what drives those. And as we know, anybody who's been to a town meeting before can tell you there's two major drivers, and it's the local schools and the regional schools. And then we've got the other items just broken down into individual components there. On the revenue side, where we're rolling up now, you see most of the components of revenue are coming back from property taxes. You've got local receipts, state aid, other items making up a small number. Typically when we're having this meeting, one of the things that will be in this slide will be a fill the gap number for use of free cash to equalize the expenditures and the revenues, and just where things are right now with what we have from the budget expenditures as they're proposed to date and the revenues, the projections we have to date. That number is very small, so the two numbers are essentially equal already. And I know there'll be a much greater discussion of free cash in some of the articles that we have coming up later, so we won't really spend a lot of time on that now, but did just want to highlight that. And then, as usual, what we will do from now until town meeting and through town meeting is look at the amounts of free cash that are allocated to particular items. We'll recommend uses that the town can vote on or not at the town meeting, and tally those as we go. And as we roll this up with final numbers for proposal to the town, we'll wind up with some recommendation of use of free cash to fill the gap between revenues and expenditures. And then I know this will also be discussed in greater detail, as I mentioned, but the free cash number that was certified by the state stands right now at $9.7 million, up from the 7.9 at the end of last year. Any questions? Oh, sorry. So I'm at the question time now. So.
Thanks, Andy. We might have the schools do their presentations and then
right.
take the full questions.
I'll come back. Okay. So will whoever's going to present the Dover schools come up?
Dover School Committee. So we'll hear from the Dover School Committee and then the regional school, and then we'll have an opportunity for comments.
We were back there talking. The original slide that you had for the 2019 fiscal year budget, it's accurate in your slide here of $10,437,843. It was incorrect on your original slide. So
thank you for the clarification.
If there's some questions for what I'm going to present on what you showed earlier, I believe it's accurate on what you had up front.
Okay. Thank you.
So, all right, 8 minutes. I'll give you some time back. Oops. All right, so quickly, as with a lot of things, I want to refresh everybody on the school's mission as well as our core values, because that is a key component in building of our budget. The Dover-Sherburne schools share in the mission to inspire, challenge, and support all students as they discover and pursue their full potential. Okay, that's the mission of our school. And there's a couple of things I want to point out in this slide. If you were here last year, you would have seen this before. We have 4 core values that we focus on. There's many other ones, but the 4 core stated values are commitment to community, equity and excellence, respect and dignity, and climate of care. And our 5 strategic objectives are innovative teaching and learning, health and well-being of students and staff, partnership with families and communities, safe and innovative facilities, and resource efficiency. So when we put our budget together, as a quick overview, the budget is responsible, sustainable, and supports the mission and strategic objectives, which you just heard about. It's compliant with state mandates, compliant with school district policies, and of course, it's always important to keep our town facilities and assets safe and up to date. The approach takes in a sharp appreciation for our town finances. We adhere to the Dover Warrant's budget guidance and guidelines to provide level services. The budget does not take into account healthcare costs. These are included in the overall town healthcare budget. It also does not take into the Chapter 70 revenues, which is approximately $800,000, and the circuit reimbursement, which we expect to be about $1 million for fiscal year 20. And as an update and a reminder, there is no capital request for fiscal year 20. So at a high level, the budget is made up of two primary areas, the school, Chickering, and then all of our out-of-district requirements. So if you look at the bottom, this is what I was highlighting earlier, if you go off of our fiscal year budget for 19 and our proposed budget for 20, it's an increase of 1.7%, or a total of $178,511. We'll come back to this slide, but I'm going to show you what goes into consideration for the Chickering part and then out-of-district. So the drivers for the budget, we expect enrollment to be about 485 to 496 students with a total of 25 sections. Of course, we have contractual obligations for salary, but if you'll notice, the salaries for fiscal year 20 are offset by some changes that were in effect in fiscal year 19 of about $184,000 and change. The additional areas that come into impact, some of our offsets, some of them are additions. We've gone through a fairly substantial review of our special ed program. We brought in some consultants to review how we were doing things, and they made some recommendations. And because of that, there's an impact to our reorganization of a reduction of about $28,000, change in programming with a reduction of $63,000, and then due to staffing based on requirements we have with students, there's a reduction of about $66,000 in educational assistance. There's a slight increase in our summer services, $13,000. There's a reduction in our one-time payment in 2019 on some textbooks. There's a slight custodial overtime reduction, and then there's a slight increase in our technology needs. Just quickly on what we've done around special ed. The major parts of the reorganization have been affected in the administrative structure, streamlining some of our roles and responsibilities, making some consistency across all the districts. We've looked at our support for social and emotional learning, and we are including a part-time adjustment counselor. It's a key need for our school. There's been a reduction in staffing in our strategic learning center. And again, most of these changes really have to do with the needs of our students. And you'll see in another slide, it's fluid. Every year is different depending on what kind of cohorts we have in our school system. So that, again, was about an increase of 0.4% at Chickering. And then for out of district, we have a total increase for the district of about 4.67. Big driver on that was transportation. As you'll see, tuition is relatively flat. So as a reminder, for out of district, it's a federally mandated program supporting all of our students from ages 3 to 22. The services must be free and appropriate public education and be provided in the least restrictive environment. We have 30 students budgeted to be placed out of district this year based on their requirements. And then, again, I mentioned before, there's a circuit breaker reimbursement from the state, and that's also not accounted for in the budget. So this is what I mentioned every year is a little bit different. So we expect the tuition to be relatively flat with a net increase of about $21,000 and change. We had 4 placements that have aged or graduated out of the out-of-district program, remember ages 3 to 22, with a decrease of about $244,000. 2 placements have stayed in district, so again that's another decrease of about $114,000. And then based on some of the placements and requirements for some of these students that are currently out of district, there's been a slight increase. Actually, there's been an increase of about $110,000. We have 4 new placements coming into the out-of-district program for about $200,000, and then there was a tuition increase of about 3%. The transportation costs, as I mentioned, are based on the ACCEPT collaborative, and there's an increase based on the participation in the program, as well as increased riders and then the length of trips. One more time, the circuit breaker, about 70% rate for the state for about $1 million for fiscal year 20. And if there's any other, anyone wants to take a look at the presentation, it's on our website, doversherman.org. And if you have any questions or comments, please speak now.
Thank you. And I neglected to request, could all speakers give their name?
Henry Spalding, 52 Haven Street, Chairman of the Dover School Committee.
Thank you, Henry. So now we'll hear from the DS Regional School Committee.
Hi, my name is Lori Crucell, and I'm with the Dover-Sherborne Regional School Committee. And our PowerPoint presentation will be available tomorrow on the website. Okay. So our mission, we share in the mission to inspire, challenge, and support all students as they discover and pursue their full potential. Next. Our strategic plan overview offers our vision and strategic objectives, which are reflected in our budget. And as Henry mentioned, our strategic objectives are resource efficiency, safe and innovative facilities, partnership with our communities, and health and wellness of student staff, and innovative teaching and learning. Next, please. Our budgetary focus is to review and revise educational services and to meet our students' needs, fund contractual salary obligations, evaluate and maintain grounds and facilities, remain fiscally responsible and mindful of financial constraints, comply with federal and state mandates, and to begin funding of OPEB liability. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next, please. Town guidance. Dover offered level service, thank you very much, and Sherborne, thank you also, offered level funding with a 2% increase for salaries. Next, please. Our budget drivers. Enrollment, which projections remain constant, collective bargaining and contractual obligations based on our negotiated agreements, social emotional learning programming and supports, and healthcare. Next, please. Our revenue projections are comprised of town assessments, state funding, student fees, and other. E&D total projected revenue, $25,292,254. Our regional funding of OPEB, we're going to discuss that in a little bit, but that's $500,000 as a start. Next, please. Fiscal operating budget expenditures. Our proposed operating budget, as we said, is an additional 2.75%. Contractual salary increases make up the lion's share of this increase. We had an educator retirement confirmed decrease in salary reduction of $90,000. Other operating budget expenditures, the added social emotional learning programming and support services. It's going to be detailed on the next slide. It's an increase of $120,000. A phase-in of a grant-funded bridge program. As some of you might recall, the bridge program was a grant 3 years ago which required a phase-in of certain salary requirements. That's an increase of $30,000. And additional educational assistance support based on our student needs. Next, please. The added social emotional learning programming is comprised of establishing a therapeutic learning center in the middle school. and entails reallocating a 1.0 educator and adding a 0.5 adjustment counselor. We also offering additional social emotional learning support for all our students with a 1.0 psychologist, a 0.4 BCBA, and a 0.5 adjustment counselor. Fiscal operating budget expenditures include healthcare, other employee-related insurance costs, including retirement and workers' comp, Medicare. We have increases in various operating accounts based on need. The net effect of continued trend budgeting has helped us with a $30,000 reduction in our operating budget. We are in our 5th year of our bus contract, which will add an additional $6,625 to our budget. And we have scheduled debt principal and interest payments, which have helped us with a $37,000 reduction. This next slide shows the breakout of the Dover-Sherborne assessments. Next, please. And these are our capital projects. We are self-funding, but this is what we are up to. Common area lighting upgrades, a new field mower, floors for certain classrooms, floors for the kitchen, updated phone systems campus-wide, and some AC condensers. The OPEB funding. For those of you that might not know, OPEB is other post-employment benefits, other than pensions, largely comprised of health insurance. We have established, the region voted in November of 2017 to establish an OPEB liability trust, and we are going to be funding $500,000 initial funding provided by the district, and it's been with funds available through community education. Right now, our liability is roughly $28 million as of June of this past year. And so the initial funding has been included in your budgets, and you're going to see a favorable impact is expected and anticipated due to future bond ratings. So we're excited about that. Next, please. Fiscal year community investment. We would like to highlight the community financial support of over $350,000. In particular, we'd like to thank the Mudge Foundation, DSCF, Boosters, FOPA, Positive, PTO, Needham Bank, and other companies and private donations. We thank you to the many supporters within our community. And finally, we would love to thank the community for all the support that we give to these wonderful 2 buildings. Thanks.
Thank you. If there are any comments on Article 4, you can come to the microphone now. Okay. We will move forward then to Article 5 with a presentation from Capital Budget.
Good evening. I'm Barry Goldman, Chair of the Capital Budget Committee. Let me first summarize the role of the Capital Budget Committee. Our fixed assets in Dover are worth well over $100 million, which includes buildings, vehicles, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. The care, repair, and maintenance replacement of these assets are in the hands of town departments, commissions, and employees. Each department submits their request for renewal and replacement of these assets to the Capital Budget Committee, which is then responsible for preparing a capital budget program for use by all town boards and officials in their deliberations. In addition, the committee requests and reviews 5-year capital budget projections from each town department and from the regional school committee. The committee independently studies and provides its recommendations on each item over $10,000 to the Warrant Committee. Capital Budget is also engaged in establishing objective standards to achieve the most economically appropriate time for replacement. These standards will give each department guidelines for their requests for new equipment and vehicles. The regional schools and the school committee retain the consulting firm On-Site Insight to provide comprehensive facility reports. Throughout this process, the Capital Budget Committee has gained a better understanding of all the school's future capital needs. The capital requests for last year, fiscal year 2019, were $262,000 for Article 5 and $288,000 for regional schools, for a total of $551,000. This compares to Article 5 requests for fiscal year 20 of $743,000, of which $92,000 has been recommended for approval. $651,000 is pending further information and vote. There is no request from the regional school for fiscal 20. First slide, please. The specific Article 5 requests include the fire and ambulance, 2 items pending, radio equipment for $32,000, and the ambulance for $292,000. The highway department has 2 items both approved, pickup truck for $44,000 and a fuel dispensing system for $36,000, both recommended for approval. The Cemetery Commission replaced the John Deere tractor with a Cub Cadet tractor, $16,000, not recommended for approval this year. Next slide. Building maintenance has 3 items, 2 pending, 1 approved. Protective Agency building roofing, $250,000 pending. Protective Agency building de-leading, firing range, $12,000 approved. And the Protective Agency building air conditioning, $50,000 pending. Park and Recreation has 1 item pending, a tractor for $27,000. Next slide. The capital budget projection for fiscal years 20 through 24. Over the last 10 years, Article 5 has averaged approximately $450,000. Looking forward, we see projected increases in Article 5 spending as follows. Fiscal year 21, approximate average levels of expenditures. Highway, Police, Chickering, and Regional School for a total of $574,000. Fiscal year 22, however, the budget request increases to approximately $4 million, almost 7-fold. The major drivers are roof replacement for 5 buildings, the townhouse, all 3 schools, Lindquist, and equipment for the fire and highway departments. The following next slide will show specifics for fiscal 22. But first, with reference to fiscal 23 and 24, both years returned to lower numbers, but are still above average at $1,700,000 and $1,020,000 respectively. The principal items are fire, police, highway, Chickering repairs, regional school repairs, and a playground. Next slide, please. Here's a more complete breakdown again of fiscal 22. You can see how this is driven, particularly with the roof replacements required on 5 buildings at a cost of $3.5 million, extrication equipment for the fire department at $650,000, and a roll-off truck for highway of $150,000. Next slide, please. In consultation with equipment manufacturers, neighboring towns, and industry experts, the committee is developing replacement guidelines based on usage and repair history. We expect these guidelines to enable more concrete objective criteria for the replacement decision. Next slide, please. The Green Communities Initiative. The committee starts with identifying town initiatives that qualify for green community grants. Capital requests and projections will be reviewed for eligibility and coordinated with the town departments, town planner, and the State Department of Energy Resources. We work to identify and examine all projects eligible for the grants in sufficient time to meet grant requirements. We are recommending an earlier start date for this work to be June 2019 for implementation of projects in fiscal 2021. The maximum award is $250,000 per year per town. However, additional grants are also available from Eversource. Next slide. Our last slide shows some of the potential qualified projects in Dover for green communities. All town buildings, including the Carroll Community Center, schools, and library, can avail themselves of building envelope and conservation measures, combined heat and power, HVAC, and even food service equipment is eligible. All town equipment-owned vehicles may qualify for allowances. Hybrid vehicles and plug-ins up to $5,000, battery electric vehicles up to $7,500, and charging stations are available. Potential vehicle projects of over $2 million could be eligible for these grants. Lighting, we've already identified the potential to change 67 streetlights to LEDs at substantial savings in energy, as well as long-term replacement costs. Our plan is to accomplish this by beginning with information sessions for all interested parties, town departments and commissions. We will invite state representatives to assist us in training, and we plan to prepare extensive information packets and checklists to bring potential grants to everyone's attention. All of these projects could result in substantial costs and energy savings to the town. I'd like to conclude by thanking my committee and all town departments, officials, and volunteers who have helped with our endeavor this year.
Thank you,
Do we
Barry.
have any questions?
If there's any comments, could you please come to the microphone on Article 5? Just step up to the microphone and we'll go in the order of people. Oh, no, this microphone here.
I'd like to say
Thanks,
some
Craig.
citizens here. I'm Craig Hughes, 3 Hughes Lane. I'm your fire chief as well as your highway director. I'm just here on behalf to speak a little bit about the fire department and the request for an ambulance this year. We've worked very hard. Barry's committee has done due diligence over and over and over, as well as our department and our staff. We still haven't come to a conclusion. I'm trying to shed a little light on a positive solution here. I've really never dealt with quite a committee like this over my 34 years, but I have to explain a little bit about the ambulance. Sure, it's a big ticket item. We're talking about $299,000. A current trade-in of our vehicle we have now is about $17,000. I moved it up from 5 years ago. I moved it up 1 year a couple years ago just because it's a priority. We put a little over $50,000 into it in the last 3 years. It averages about anywhere from 216 runs to a high of 295 calls a year. So an average of about 260 over the last 4 years. It's a real primary piece of equipment for the department. I don't want to say it's the most important one because they're all important. But, we strive on patient care. The vehicle we have now, it's done us well. It's 12 years old. It's a 2007. And by the time a new one, if it was approved this year, it would take roughly a year to build. So you'd be looking at 14 years old if we kept this one. If not, 15 years. So I'm just asking the support here, and then I'll turn the last few minutes over to Ford Spalding, the Board of Fire Engineers chairperson. And it's really needed. The way we operate, sometimes we're overweight with the personnel we carry. We're not what's called an ALS community versus BLS. So all the surrounding towns around us are ALS. So when we have, a certain situation that requires, I'm not going to give you any examples, but more, paramedics, we call on them, they intercept with us, or they meet us at the house or the location. They'll jump on board if needed, along with a patient in the back, along with 2 EMTs of our own in the back. That's a lot of weight. This vehicle wasn't quite designed for that. It's done the town very well. It's kept up very nice by the EMTs. They do a superb job. But we have new guidelines and restrictions we have to meet every year. And that's regulated by the state and the feds, so I don't want to say we're out of compliance, but we certainly could do a little better with the vehicle. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'll save a little bit for town meeting if I have to. Thank you very much.
That's great.
Thank you, Eric. I'm Ford Spalding. I'm chairman of the Board of Fire Engineers. And excuse my back, but that's what you get. I live at 5 Hutton Road. I'm going to read this, and that'll be the quickest way to get through. Whenever the fire department makes any request to the voters of Dover, we do this first and foremost for the safety of our fire and ambulance personnel, so they may take care of Dover citizens. Safety is our number one concern, and Dover has always supported the department with the best equipment for the benefit of our personnel and fellow citizens. Currently, we have approximately 50 Dover citizens and town employees that serve the department. These individuals step forward and become part of a team of call, fire, and ambulance personnel. They get paid when they make a call or in training. Some receive a stipend for leadership positions. None are full-time. This works well for them, it works well for the town, and they're thought of professionals by our neighboring towns, as well as our citizens of Dover. The department requests for a new ambulance to replace our current ambulance, which was placed in service in November of 2007, is not new. In fact, it's been in the queue for 5 years. Our current ambulance has served the town well. However, it does not meet the current safety standards that are in force. Yes, it's grandfathered. We believe it is safe. We know it is safe, but we can do better. In the last 3 years, the town has spent approximately $50,000 on maintenance costs, and 79 days in the last 3 years the ambulance has been in the shop. We have received 2 bids recommending a little over $292,000, which is for the ambulance and radio systems. Let me go over the following safety reasons why this vehicle is important. The new vehicle will weigh approximately 18,000 pounds and has a liquid spring system, which will mean greater stability for the people in the vehicle, i.e. less swaying for the patient as well as the EMTs. The weight of the vehicle and the addition of 4-wheel drive provides a safer ride in inclement and off-road conditions. Seating for first responders can be at a 180-degree swivel chair or in a front and rear tracking system. This gives the patient the ability of the EMTs to deal directly with the patient. Seat belts are an improvement over the single over-the-shoulder belt. The new belt system provides 4 or 6-point restraints. They also have an alarm system if it's not used. Obviously, this provides greater protection for the first responder, as well as it does allow the first responder to deal directly with the patient. The stretcher bed will be much easier to put on the ambulance, and it has a front and rear locking system providing greater protection for the patient in the event of a quick stop or an accident. The box, which is where the EMT and the patient are, is slightly larger and will be designed with improved storage cabinets for medical equipment. Equipment is stored so it does not move around and is easily accessible. The last safety improvement I want to give to you is the ambulance roof and the floor is built considerably stronger so as not to collapse in a rollover. This is safer for the passengers and allows the doors into the box not to be crushed so they can be opened to extract passengers. As Craig says, the ambulance averages about 260 runs a year. It's the same ambulance that Medfield, Westwood, Walpole, Sherburne, and I found out Belmont also has. We need to continue to honor our EMT personnel by saying yes to this request, just as we have always done in the past. We need to provide the best safety vehicles for our equipment for our fire and ambulance personnel. They are our neighbors and they are our friends. The ambulance is 12 years old, and by the time, if we get a positive vote at the town meeting, it'll be 13 to 14 years old when it's ready to be purchased. Safety. Safety is our number one concern. Last week, the Board of Fire Engineers met with some of the capital budget members, and 2 issues came up which I want to address.
Board, we're far over 2 minutes.
I'm almost done. One, we followed up with leadership of both Sherburne and Medfield fire departments. They're happy with their ambulance purchases and have had no difficulty driving the vehicles. Sherburne even indicated that 4-wheel drive was an asset this winter. I also want to point out that the ambulance is smaller than our ladder truck, which they drive all the time. I also was with the Belmont Fire Chief earlier this evening. He said it has been a real asset in the town of Belmont. I also talked to Representative Denise Garlick today, and she said there are no public safety grants for ambulances anymore. Maybe in rare circumstances, she said Dover will not qualify in that case. She said there will not be any state aid from the Commonwealth. Thank you for your consideration. We look forward to your support.
Thank you. Any other comments on Article 5? Okay. We'll move now to Article 10 on the Information Technology Study. We're going to hear from Bob.
Hi. Just a couple of things to get me going. One, I know Craig is here, and I want to thank him because I noticed that on Walpole Street, the sweeper vehicle was going around picking up all of the sand. And so that is the surest sign that spring is around the corner. Thanks, Craig, for that insight. And then I'd like to thank the people who have helped the selectmen put together a series of presentations tonight. We've been short-staffed in the selectman's office for quite a while now, and I'm very, very proud of the work that people have done, pitched in and helped, and kept the townhouse running pretty smoothly. So thank you for that. So I don't have a lot of numbers. So if we go to the first page, I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly, buy back some time that Eric is going to want so we stay on schedule. If you can't hear me or if I'm speaking too quickly, just raise a hand. I've been in the back before. I know how hard it is to hear. It's not exactly the most acoustically friendly room in this building. So the selectmen on Article 10 are requesting appropriation of about $250,000 for a comprehensive assessment of the town's work processes and the technology environment. We're not sure when and if this has ever been done before. The work processes are mostly paper-based. The technology environment is something that has been patched together over time. We're really looking for a workflow analysis and a process reengineering study. And it's not really about the paper processes that we've been using. It's much more about understanding the information flows through a fairly complex organization of independent, siloed departments. So if we can figure out how the work flows through it and how the information flows through it, we might stand a better chance of using technology to make the processes more effective. So we'll look at also the equipment, the network, the applications that we use, all with the aim of putting together a multi-year plan, probably in a 3 to 5 year time frame, to modernize the infrastructure that we use in the town. The other aspect of the grant, of the appropriation request, is we expect to have some pilot projects identified throughout this process, and we want to have money available to implement these pilot projects. And that way, once we start, and we're going to hope that we can start in July, that we can run through the fiscal year 20 budget fully engaged in this activity. Some of the motivators is really coming from the citizens of Dover, who are looking for other ways to interact with the town. We're into the smartphone era by 10 years plus. A lot of people do business in a very different way. We want to understand that and try to accommodate that. And our infrastructure today, as I said, has sort of been patched together over the past 15 or so years. So that's the broader picture. The Board of Selectmen's plan is to supplement that initiative by doing a couple of three things. One, we really want to establish a technology advisory board of residents with expertise. Other towns have used that very successfully. We have developed and promoted a mission statement for such a board. We talked about it in our Board of Selectmen meeting, I think March 7th, it might have been earlier. We will vote on that mission statement at our next meeting on Thursday night. So the Technology Board is an advisory board. It provides expertise, advice, and review on strategy and implementation practices. Then the second thing we want to do is we want to make sure we have enough qualified resources within the town, because once you start to get into implementation activities, you're going to need somebody on staff who can manage those activities and cover the relatively short list I put together of things that have to get done as you make these kind of investments. And then finally, the board recognizes that we're going to have to sit together with other committees and on an annual basis, take a look at where we are in the plan, adjust, and set priorities as we go forward. So it's sort of to close the loop around how we go about doing this kind of an initiative. And then our goal, and here I have to say, thank you, Robin, for putting together this graphic. She hit the target, but I thought she was aimed at me. And anyway, what are our goals? Combine function-specific applications, because each town department has applications that they use within an overall integrated platform. Include all town departments and committees and coordinate with the schools. And to provide citizens with access to all information in real time, or the ability to access the information when they want to and where they want to. Did I save you time?
Thank you. Excellent. If anyone would like to comment on Article 10, please come to the microphone now.
I'm Jerry Clark, Valley Road, Chair of the Board of Health, and I've had several meetings with various members of the selectmen. I think the whole purpose here is to address a number of weaknesses that the town does have and a number of places where we've just not kept up. Number one, we have absolutely no real secure backup of all the paper that comprises the information of the town. If you're not aware of it, we did suffer a significant fire loss in the town back in the 70s. Records were lost. We're at risk of that happening again. We have an enormous amount of time that's spent by personnel in each of the offices responding to citizens coming in. Can I see this plan? Where is my well? What is going to happen if the neighbor has a new septic system? And each of those requests requires anywhere from 5 minutes to almost a half an hour to pull plans out, present them, have them copied in a very inefficient manner. None of this makes any sense in today's world. Now, we've had an offer from another town technology board chairman to lead a discussion on this. We are clearly way behind in all forms of integrating the information. The perfect example is think through what it takes to get a permit. It goes from the building department to another department, back and forth, and if you've been involved in that, you know that it is very time-consuming and very inefficient, and it's not the way business is done today.
Thank you, Jerry.
Any other
Anyone else?
comments?
Hey, Tom.
Tom Crowley, Cedar Hill. Could you tell us what the amount of a liability is for the regional school on the funding for the pension? You didn't give a total number.
I think John and Robin are both going to talk about the OPEB.
And what is
liability.
Sherburne doing? Are they going to do the same thing?
I really don't know what Sherburne's doing.
Okay, be nice to know.
Robin may know.
Any other comments? Article 10?
Thank you very
All right,
much.
Thank you. We're going to move to Article 11, and I believe Robin's also going to touch on 12, 13, and 14.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robin Hunter, and I'm on the Board of Selectmen. And this evening, I'm going to be talking about Article 11, 12, 13, and 14. And just to give you guys a little bit of background as to where we're coming from. So, since the summer, the Board of Selectmen, and actually since the end of last year's town meeting, the Board of Selectmen have begun to look at our cash reserves and determine, and what we wanted to do was ultimately have a strategy for those cash reserves. As part of the strategy, and John Jeffries is going to talk a lot about the strategy on Article 26, so this is sort of the cart before the horse, but it's the only way we can do it. So one of our strategies was to put in place what we call stabilization funds. So these are funds where we can take some of those cash reserves and earmark them for a specific project or item or liability that we have. So Article 11 is for the regional school OPEB liability, and I'm going to, for that liability, we have a plan in place. Article 12 was setting up a stabilization account for long-term capital items, and we right now don't have a plan that we could present to the town on how we would go about funding that. A third stabilization fund was to put together a fund for land preservation. Towns like Essex have spent many years putting together a program and then funding it through a stabilization fund. Again, at this time, it's a little premature, and we do not have a plan to present to the town. And the third item was looking at our existing stabilization fund to determine whether or not there was something we could do with that. So where we stand right now, we are considering withdrawing the Articles 12, 13, and 14, and we do have a plan for Article 11, and that's what I'm going to focus on right now, and that is the OPEB liability at the region. So as the Regional School Committee pointed out, this is a liability. It's a contractual liability of the region, and it basically funds health care or retiree health care costs. The total amount of the liability is approximately $28 million, and Dover's share of that is $16 million. We are about 56.7% of the region. Some of you may remember, I've noticed a lot of faces I've seen before, that in 2009, the Board of Selectmen stood up in front of the town. The town also has this retiree pension cost, and we had received proceeds from a lawsuit, and at that time, the selectmen asked the town to allow them to take the proceeds from the lawsuit and fund the town's OPEB liability. And in hindsight, that was a really good idea from the selectmen of that town. Right now, the town's OPEB liability is funded at about 60%, an extremely healthy funding rate. Very few towns have their liabilities funded at such a high rate. So as we started looking at our cash reserves, and we had to look at the other side of the equation, those are the liabilities, things that are on our books that we know we have to fund over time. One of the largest liabilities was really our portion of the OPEB liability, which, again, just as a reminder, is somewhere around $16 million. The regional school has not funded their liability. They pay as you go. Tonight, they talked about funding, making a contribution of $500,000, which is a great start for the total liability. So we looked at this liability and said, is there a way that Dover can begin to start to save money? Because ultimately, we're going to have to pay this. This is on our books. Over the next 30 years, it's going to be growing, and we're going to have to pay it. So one of the ways, talking to our attorneys, was that Dover could actually set up their own account. So what the Board of Selectmen is going to recommend is for us to take some of our cash reserves. I think the Warrant Committee pointed out that there's $9.7 million there, and transfer that approximately $1.6 million, which represents 10% of our share of the liability, and put that into the special account so that we can begin to, for lack of a better term, save for it. What's important to know is what Dover does has no impact on the total funding of that regional liability. This would be an account, that's Dover's account. We would hopefully put together a plan to continue to fund it over time. Sherborne has no access to this money. The region has no access to the money. It's just Dover's way of trying to be prudent, fiscally responsible, and to begin to accumulate funds for which we're going to have to pay this liability. It will, of course, require a 2/3 vote to get those funds out of the account. And when we presented this to the Warrant Committee, one of the members astutely said, well, is that a wise thing? It's difficult at town meetings to convince the town to get funds. So I think the simplest way for me to say this is every single year we're funding a portion of OPEB as part of our regional assessment. What we would do is we would take the funds that we've put aside and use a portion of those funds to fund the regional assessment for OPEB when that fund has enough money in it. And so the town would be in the same position. If you vote no, then we'd have to increase our tax rate to pay for it, or you could move the money from the account that's already established. It's a cause we all agree that we know we have to fund. So, we on the Board of Selectmen think that this is a good idea. Again, we talked about where the money's coming from. It's coming from free cash, and John is going to talk about this in a lot of detail. So I'm going to let him cover that. He's going to talk about the strategy that's been put in place for the town to manage free cash, because we understand ultimately what we have to do is try and stabilize the tax rate and decrease the rate at which the tax rate is increasing. So this is all part of the strategy that we're putting in place. Again, I'm going to let John, because I only have 8 minutes, although I think I should have 8 times 4, but that's okay.
Right.
I'm going to let...
You can go on longer.
Right. So, so that's not to bore you, I'm going to let John go over the cash reserves, the how and why. But I think the one thing that I really want to stress, and this is very important to the Board of Selectmen, is that really what we're trying to do is put a long-range strategy in place. We want to be thoughtful about what to do with which some citizens say is excess cash. But we do have liabilities out there that need to be funded. We also need to have a certain amount of money in what I call a savings account, which is what this cash reserve account is, so that first of all, that helps us or maintains a really good bond rating, which is important to us. And over time, we are going to have a need to float bonds. There are many buildings in this town that are going to need to be rebuilt or rehabbed over the next 10 to 20 years. So it's important to maintain that. We just really ask citizens on town meeting to be patient, to allow us to roll out the strategy. We really don't want to make uninformed decisions that will lead to consequences that are going to hurt the town. So we are asking you to be patient. Let's make sure that any short-term gains, don't turn into long-term pains. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you. So if you have general comments about the use of free cash, we ask that you wait until after the Article 26 presentation, because we're going to hear a lot more information about free cash. And at this time, if you have comments about the stabilization funds or OPEB or Robin's presentation specifically, please come up to the microphone.
Hi, Robin. Thank you. I'm Ken Botticher at 4 Hughes Lane, and I had a quick question. So the most recent estimate of the liability is approximately $28 million, and Dover's share is $16 million, or 56%. I'm curious if you know how that percentage is derived.
So the percentage is based upon, so we have a regional school agreement because the school is Dover and Sherborne, and primarily it's based upon enrollment. And that will change over time. So that's a great question. Just because it's 56.6% today, it doesn't mean that that's what it will be, 10 years from now or 5 years from now. It really depends. And that's how we split the costs of the regional school. It's always based upon this regional formula, which is primarily driven by enrollment.
Jerry Clark again, Valley Road. Just as a background, I spent 11 years in the federal courts testifying for Taft-Hartley pension plans, and this is very much analogous. The question really comes down to, if you establish, starting with 1.6 million and building it up over the years, a fund which would be available for use but not necessarily spent at any one point in time, how would you intend to invest that so that the return on that would be comparable to what we would expect of a properly managed pension fund?
I believe, and I am not an expert in this field, but I believe there are guidelines by which you have to invest those funds. So, Mr. Valente, do you have an answer?
So I'm Carl Valenti. I'm the interim town administrator. Under state law, we actually have much more flexibility in investing those funds than we do with our free cash account. And it really depends on how quickly or how long before we need those funds. But any investment earnings stay with the fund, so it helps the fund grow larger.
Thank you.
Who's going to invest the money and how will it be invested? It can't just sit as cash, so.
No, well, if the town appropriates the fund, we will hire a consultant that specializes in investment management, specifically of pension funds, because we need to be prudent.
But we don't hire outside investment managers for our pension funds. Most of that goes to Norfolk County, I think, and they manage it. So you have no idea at this point who would manage it. And will it go out for bid?
At this juncture, I have not hired a consultant or interviewed consultants. It will be something that we will do if these funds are appropriated. And thank you, that was an excellent question.
Thank you. Are there any more comments related to Articles 11, 12, 13, or 14?
Gavin Koo, 41 Claybrook Road. What is the plan, at least from a strategic standpoint, on how to manage the future growth of these liabilities, whether it's OPEB in particular or pension? What is the plan? I mean, it's great to fund and try to fund a liability, but unless you constrain the growth.
Right. So these plans are contractual obligations, and they continue to be part of contracts that we have with certain unions in the town. Primarily, at the region, it's primarily the teachers union and some of the other staff. So, at this point, it's all part of those negotiations, and healthcare has become a very big factor in union negotiations, and it will be up to the union and the town to talk to up to the town and the region to talk to those unions and begin to have discussions about these types of benefits that are available. But right now, it continues to be a benefit that is available to teachers throughout Massachusetts.
And just to clarify, is that health care pre-Medicare? So if they retire early before 65 or whatever the appropriate age, or is it at any point?
It's post-retirement.
Post-retirement, so a supplement on top of, okay.
Other comments? Okay, thank you. We are going to move to Article 15.
Bob Spratt, 28 Francis Street. I don't know if I did it the last time. No slides on this one, two quickies, I hope. Article 15 is it's a non-monetary article. Essentially, what we're asking the voters to do is to amend last year's Article 15 that was amended at town meeting that allocated $200,000 to do for work that would be involved in the study of renovating Carroll. Specifically, it was limited to money spent on the renovation of Carroll. We're asking that we adjust that to include spending the monies not only just on renovating Carroll, but at looking at a new facility. So broadening where we could spend the money. Currently, we have $195,000 in that account. Article 16.
Bob, we might
Oh.
pause.
Pause.
Let's just pause there. Are there any comments related to Article 15? You can come to the microphone. Do you have a comment about Article 15?
Yes, this deals with Article 15 presentation.
Well, we're going to do the presentation for Article 16 about both of them.
So Article 15 was using the money that was appropriated last year, not just on renovating Carroll, but also to look at a new facility, should we need to. Right, that was the
So if there's no comments for 15, we'll move to Article 16.
So Article 16 is a request for $50,000 as contingency money in case there's a serious breakdown in any of the core infrastructure systems at Carroll. This is, I believe, last year or the year before, town meeting approved a $50,000 request. But given the work that we're doing on the Carroll project, we think that the timeline before we come to a decision and action is going to be extended a little bit. And so we thought it prudent to add to that contingency account, again, in case some critical piece of infrastructure breaks. We want to maintain the building. We want to keep it open. There's lots of functions that go on there. We think it's a prudent thing to do.
Is that 1-5 or
5-0. That was Kathy Weld.
All right, do we have the
Okay,
presentation?
so since we're talking Carroll, I would like to invite Ford Spaulding to come up to give you all an update on where we are on the Carroll project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now you get the front side. I'm Ford Spaulding from 5 Hutton Road. I'm chairing the Carroll Community Center Committee. If we go to the next slide, which is our project goal, it's basically we are going to present, hopefully to a fall town meeting, probably in October, two choices. One is to renovate Carroll, and the other is to build new, assuming Article 15 passes. Those are going to be the two choices. The decision is going to be up to you. It's not going to be up to us. We're a fact-driven committee. We're going to give you the facts. We're going to give you the numbers. You all are going to make the choice as to the future of Carroll, whether it'll be a new, renovated, or fall back and we just continue doing what we're doing. What we've completed to date is we've looked at a full renovation and maintenance costs. We've used the existing information that has been accumulated over approximately 20 years of reports. We've used that information to put together our numbers. We've met with Don Mills, who has been the architect on the project to date, so he's helped us. And we have used, as have the schools, the on-site in-site consulting services. And what was interesting is when we looked at their report and the work that had been done before, they're pretty much identical. The numbers have been updated, but they're pretty much identical. We've been out and we surveyed 9 like towns using population, wealth, and tax bases. We've also visited community centers in 7 neighboring communities. The next steps is, over the next month, we are going to conduct an analysis of the information collected. We're going to prepare materials that we're going to come out and bring to you, the citizens, in as many groups as we can over the next few months, creating many multiple channels of communication, trying to find the best way to reach the most people, so you all are going to be able to have enough information when you come to town meeting. What our initial impressions are is a few like towns, like Dover, have really no dedicated facilities. They've operated out of their townhouse for a COA or recreation department, churches, or other buildings. We found also that towns have dedicated office space pretty much for COA and recreation. They have activity rooms when they have a building of shared activity rooms. What we've found is that buildings have a lifespan, but I'll call it a day span. In the morning, you have early afternoon, the seniors will use the building. In the afternoon after school, students use the building, and after that, people like most of us can use the building. So you can use these buildings as rooms as shared rooms. Facilities are mixed. Some are renovations and some are new. Core programs, as I said, there's also socializing space in some of the buildings where you can go meet people and you can have coffee, and it mixes various generations. All directors of the facilities said the daily activity cycle, which I've discussed, the growth in the programs, when you build it, they come. That's been an example. And parking. Parking's very interesting. When you look at Natick, they have a great new facility, but because they have limited parking, it limits the amount of people that can be there. And so parking is a very important consideration. This is our project timeline. We are going to, April, May, and June, we're going to engage and inform our residents. July, we're going to do those people that are still in town. We're going to engage residents to the best of our ability, maybe one or two in the room, but that's okay. And then in September, we'll do our final outreach, bringing information, and it's all about information to the citizens. And then October, a special town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments on Article 15 or 16?
I'm Janet Greenwood from Hawthorne Lane. Ford, I'm just curious, you gave two alternatives. Will anybody be considering another alternative, such as a sale of the building, lease back, build a new building and have apartments overhead, or will it, or you don't know yet?
Really, that's not something that we've discussed at all, although that has been done in the past. In the past, we suggested having housing in the building along with a community center, but that didn't go anywhere. But that has not been a consideration. Obviously, when you think of the options, one option would be continuing doing what we're doing, or tear it down. But what's very important is no option has a no-cost option. Whatever we do is going to cost money. Does that help, Janet? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ford.
Yes, Thomas.
What consideration is being given to the fact that Carroll School is over 100 years old and is a historical building?
That's interesting. I'm not sure it is a historical building, and I think somebody's going to tell us it is or it isn't. But right now, we haven't talked about it as a historical building, but that's a good point. We'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Bob?
Well, you just speak.
Tom, that question, there are people who we haven't talked to, you don't hear me. We've held a couple of small forums already, and the whole point is different points of view to see where our objective really is to try to find consensus that most town people will agree to in terms of direction and in terms of funding, because we're going to need 2/3 yes votes for whatever we choose at town meeting. It's a high bar. But there are certainly people in town who we already talked to who bring up the
grade for that school. Warrant is fifth grade at that class. So there is sentimentality attached to the building. As we go through, as we really ramp up the engagement effort to see how we're trying to get a sense of how important it is to the town.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's important. We need a 2/3 vote, so therefore, the community, the entire community is going to have to coalesce around a plan. And if they don't coalesce around a plan, we continue doing what we're doing. And that's as simple as that. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move now to Article 22, which is accept Mass General Law 59, Section 57A, payment of tax bills less than $100.
22 or 23?
22. Does the board want to describe this one? No? Okay, we don't have a presentation on that. Is anybody having comments on Article 22? Okay. We'll move to Article 23, accept Dover Farms Road, Hughes Lane, Anns Way, and Monroe Court as public ways.
Thank you. I'm Gareth Taub, 10 Dover Farms Road, representing the Homeowners Association of Dover Farms. We are, next slide please, we're 4 streets, Dover Farms Road, Anns Way, Hughes Lane, and Monroe Court. There are 20 homes in this development. The homes are individually owned and they own the land on which the homes sit. We are a 40B, which means that 5 of our homes are affordables. And what does that mean? It means that there were certain zoning waivers when the property was constructed. Smaller lot size, for example, we have a shared septic water treatment system, and certain parts of paragraph 248 were waived as well in the construction of the development. It also gives us some unique capabilities. The 40B homes are owned today by 3 single moms, some of which are widows of veterans. There are firemen and other civil servants who live in those homes. And it gives us a community, a diverse community of people, both for market rate units and affordable units. And this is the first time I've lived in a 40B development, and it's quite encouraging, the community that develops there. The thing that all of these homes have in common is that they're all dedicated to the town of Dover, maintaining the community and maintaining their homes. And we contribute just over about $200,000 in taxes to the town each year. Next slide, please. We are similar to a standard subdivision. All the homes and lots are individually owned. The HOA, which is organized to manage the common areas and the shared septic system according to a trust, which the septic system is in, manages that and has the rights to grant any access to any of the roads should they be necessary. All roads and access were built to town standards by the builder in terms of width. The streets meet width requirements. They meet turnaround, paving, curbs, berms. They're all there, even to the fact that there are granite curbs at the entrance to the development, which are required by paragraph 248. 2 days ago, I received a letter from the enforcement officer of the town stating that we lacked, I think he called it pavement boundary markers, the concrete things that go in the ground to mark the edges of the roads. They were not installed by the builder because they were assumed to have been waived when the roads were constructed. The association board, which is with me tonight, has already contacted GLM Engineering, and we're waiting for a bid to have those road markers put in. GLM tells us that those markers can be installed as soon as the ground thaws, because they have to go down 3 feet. So that is in the works. We have therefore submitted to the town a citizen's petition to accept the streets as town roads. All work has been completed. The acceptance plan and certified engineering drawings have been delivered to the town and are on file. We're all taxpayers, as I mentioned, residents with kids in the schools, and we're requesting the same rights as other town residents for street plowing and maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have comments on Article 23, please come to the microphone.
Yes, Jim Dawley, 25 Donley. Without forming an opinion on whether the town should take the street or not, have you relied on the original comprehensive permit to see whether it could be donated to the town?
There is nothing in the original comprehensive permit that says it was designed to be a private roadway all along. So we are assuming it is. Our attorney says, who could not be here tonight, says it should be able to be. We would retain all the private utilities like the septic system and Verizon and Colonial Water and Eversource that run in there, and we would maintain those. We're just asking for the paved street.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one quick question. The development, when it was laid out, there was a requirement for a prospective emergency egress onto Burnham Road. How is that going to be handled, or is it left unchanged?
I'm not aware of that. There's nothing that I've read in the comprehensive permit that talks about that. I'd have to go back and look. Okay, I was not aware of that. We will have to check that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We will move next to Article 24, accept Dancer Farm Drive as a public way.
Good evening. Andrew Veens, 3 Dancer Farm Drive, and I am here representing the Homeowners Association of Dancer Farm Drive. Article 24 is asking the residents of the town at town meeting to accept Dancer Farm Drive as a public way, and similar to the last presentation, very similar reasons. Development of Dancer Farm Drive is complete, and there's no further construction or land development planned. All 8 homes on Dancer Farm Drive are sold and occupied. We have confirmed that Chief Hughes, as well as Mike and Jerry, the town engineer, have reviewed the as-built plans and agreed that the developer, Keystone Development, had complied with all aspects of the project and have deemed the project complete. There was a letter to the planning board dated October 29th that was accepted at the November meeting in regard to that. And again, similarly, as citizens, property owners, and taxpayers in the town, we're paying approximately $175,000 in annual real estate taxes based on current valuations and rate, and would like to be afforded the benefits afforded to other property owners, including plowing, sanding, the first sign of spring, street sweeping, and other customary road maintenance activities. For the avoidance of any doubt, there is a stormwater management plan in place on Dancer Farm Drive. The Homeowners Association will continue to maintain that at our own cost and expense, consistent with the deed and covenant entered into the town when the subdivision was approved.
Thank you. Any comments on Article 24? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will go next to Article 25, amend Part 2 of the general bylaws, a ban on the commercial use, distribution of plastic bags.
Good evening, everybody. We are a group of 8th graders from DSMS, and we are part of the Environment CAG. We are here to get a ban on plastic bags. I'm Nico Ban, 7 Pleasant Street.
I'm Christian Casal from Sherburne.
I'm Matthew Darren, 8 Washington Street on Sherburne.
I'm Nick Kuby, 11 Stagecoach Lane. Why plastic bags are bad for the environment. They pollute our water and our land. They are made from non-renewable resources such as polyethylene. They contribute to climate change because for every 9 plastic bags that are produced, it's equivalent to driving your car a half-mile down the road. And streets around the world are littered with trash.
So we have found many plastic bags around Dover. For example, we have found some in the Charles River. We found some at the Chickering Elementary School and all around the Sawin Museum.
What happens when an animal eats the bags? So an animal finds the bag and it eats it because it thinks that it's something that it would regularly eat. Some animals choke on the bags or they can't digest it and they die. And biodegradable plastic bags turn into microplastics and fish eat it, and then it is found in fish that we eat.
Are plastic bags recyclable? They cannot be recycled because they collect too much dirt and trash on the way to the facility. They also get tangled up with other recyclables in the bins. They are then thrown out with whatever is in them, even if it is other recyclables that could have been recycled.
One of the reasons why we're using plastic bags over paper is the price, and we can resolve this issue by selling paper bags for 5 to 10 cents per bag. Most paper bags are made on farms that have a policy where for almost every tree that is cut down, they plant a new one. Reusable bags are the best option, and they can be sold at stores or as fundraisers.
So 93 towns in Massachusetts have banned plastic bags, and over 40% of the people in Massachusetts have laws in their town that are against single-use plastic bags. So some example of these towns are Plymouth, Duxbury, Gloucester, Needham, Marshfield, Wellesley, Natick, Newton, Boston, and Framingham.
Why is it good for Dover to ban? Banning plastic bags is good for the town because it shows progressive thinking and care for the environment. It sets a good example for children and the community. And it could possibly be a statewide ban because Boston had recently banned them.
Dover stores responses to voluntary ban. We called the Dover Deli and the Dover Market. They both refused a ban because, they both refused a ban, and the Dover Deli said that by putting a price on the bags, it would drive away business, but many residents support the ban.
Where are we now? The Dover Selectmen support us and the plastic bag ban, and the Recycling Committee voted unanimously to support the ban.
We have signed up for the Dover Town cleanup, and State Senator John Rush is coming to join us. Thank you for listening to us, and we hope that you consider our suggestion.
Thank you. If you have any comments on Article 25, will you please come to the microphone? Jerry, they can't hear you if you don't stand at the mic.
I would recommend that before you show that slide again, it is Senator Michael Rush.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on Article 25?
Yeah, Charlie Long, 121 Walpole Street. I shop at both Roach Brothers and at Shaw's, and Roach Brothers now is required to use the paper bags. All I can say is the plastic's a lot easier, a lot more convenient, and takes up a lot less space in the trash. That's my personal experience. So I don't see any advantage of getting rid of the plastic bags. We've got a lot of illustrations here about plastic waste. I haven't noticed any those little brown plastic bags. There's been talk about them, but you never see them along the street. What I see along the street is Bud Light cans. They're very popular. Plastic bags I don't see thrown out in the trash along the street, but I find them a lot more convenient than the paper bags.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ken Botticher, 4 Hughes Lane. I was curious if, perhaps you don't have the information tonight, but if you plan on presenting at town meeting, you might be interested in getting with the recycling committee or talking with some folks here about what the potential impact might be if Dover were to implement the ban and how many plastic bags we might be diverting from the trash stream.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Matthew Schmid, 27 Pine Street. I want to commend you for your proposal. In the UK, they have a nationwide cost for consumers using plastic bags, and it has raised billions, well, millions anyway, multi-millions of pounds, which could help the environment in some way. And perhaps you might consider, instead of an outright ban, as Mr. Long was saying, it will raise an inconvenience factor. We want to discourage people from using plastic bags. We want to discourage the commercial outfits from offering them without some kind of cost. And I think that if you proposed a 10-cent or 20-cent charge that the commercial folks in town would levy on their plastic bags for customers who didn't want to bring in their own bag, I think you'd have a better effect all around. The commercial people would still have a plastic bag for using moist or other products that could that wouldn't work well in a craft bag. So that's what I would suggest you reconsider.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. We will move forward with Article 26, transfer from free cash to stabilize the tax rate.
Great. Follow the middle school kids. Gentlemen, very well done. Extremely well done. I know that there's 4 very proud parents in the audience this evening. John Jeffries, Chairman, Board of Selectmen. Before I begin this evening, it'd be remiss of us not to thank Diana, who's done a fabulous job with the slides, the presentation, the changes, all of the last minute things that have gone in this evening. Would you just stand up and give us an opportunity to say thank you? Thank you. So, free cash, financial strategy. So it is apropos that I get to go last this evening because my first year as a selectman, Robin Hunter was the chair, and she said, you're going to get to go last. You're going to get to do the last presentation. It's about free cash, and it's all about tying the entire evening together. We have to take all of the articles that need to be funded. We have to backfill everything, and the entire evening rests upon getting that part done. You may recall that 2 years ago, we had an article about the rail trail. And 2 years ago, town meeting ran long, really long. And it was late in the evening when I got to rise for the free cash presentation. And when I stood in front of the microphone, the 3 people in front of me were sound asleep. So I thought it would be a really good idea going forward that we move free cash to a time in the meeting where we could focus on not only segregating and taking a look at how we use free cash, but an entire strategy around free cash. So after last year's meeting, we decided that it would be a really good idea to study this in depth. So, with that, free cash is an accounting term for cash reserve. A stable, predictable, consistent cash reserve is a critical component to every home, business, and town. A strong cash reserve is critical, as you've heard this evening, to a AAA rating. As a tool, cash reserve has many functions. Over the past few years, the functions and use of the reserve has been a topic of much debate. After last year's town meeting, the Board of Selectmen formed a discussion group to address and formulate a strategy for our cash reserve. The group was comprised of Eric Alders, Chairman of Warrant, Kate Canny, former Chairman of Warrant, Bonnie Akins. Is Bonnie here this evening? Bonnie, would you stand up so people can say thank you for this? Bonnie Aiken, former Chairman of the Board of Assessors. Fred Hammerly, member, Warrant. Jerry Lane, our treasurer, collector. Karen McTavish, our assessor, and myself. Diane, could you go to the next slide? In formulating a strategy, the group studied and discussed our current cash reserves since 2005. In the next slide, you will see the history of our cash reserve from 2005. Currently, we have $9,785,433. When my good friend Tom Crowley was made aware of this, he said, Jeffries, 10 million? Is that yen? And I said, no, Tom, that's US dollars. The group determined we would work to maintain a healthy reserve using a strategic and disciplined approach. We felt it was important to keep our reserve within a guideline that was no less than 10% of our budget and probably no more than 17%. We discussed uses of the reserve that would be considered each year at town meeting, as Robin mentioned earlier. Simply stated, we would look at the use of reserve year by year. Some examples include stabilizing the tax rate, funding our current long-term liabilities, as you've heard, setting aside money for large, known future capital expenses, as you've heard, and preservation of our land, water resources, as Jerry pointed out, and open space. Diana, slide 3. Thank you. The graph here illustrates the reserve since 2005. The title of this graph could be, "This is Fiscal Responsibility." The graph shows that Dover's department heads and management have run the town very well. Financial analysts consider this type of reserve the hallmark of a successful organization. Please note 2019 is an estimate. Slide 4. This is the formula that creates a cash reserve. 1, revenue, in excess of estimates from the prior year. Expenditures that were less than the budget from the prior fiscal year is number 2. And number 3, unused free cash from the prior years. The total is certified by the Mass Department of Revenue. It's important to note that free cash may be appropriated for reducing at town meeting for any purpose, including reducing property taxes for the coming fiscal year. Slide 5. This is the math that goes into the formula. Line 1, $7,913,093 was the amount at the end of the prior year. Line 2, we add $445,843, revenue in excess of estimates. Line 3, expenditures less than budgeted. The $2,482,375, as you've heard from the Dover schools, is a larger than normal amount. This is due to the $1.1 million of special education circuit breaker that was alluded to twice this evening. Line 4. In adjustments, we add back in adjustments. Line 5, subtract money used to balance the budget. This is what I was referring to when I made my opening remarks. At the end of the evening, you have to plug every gap. You have to make sure we have operating money. This is what happens at town meeting, and it's money we may use throughout the year. Line 6, total free cash. The goal of the Board of Selectmen is maintaining a strong formula-based reserve, as Mrs. Hunter alluded to, while implementing financial strategy to smooth upcoming expenses. Note, as you saw earlier, we have some very large capital expenses in our future. We are proposing the use of reserves to fund currently unfunded liabilities, including retiree health insurance. The current unfunded liability at the region, as of right now, is $28,900,000. Dover's responsible, as you saw, for almost 56.7% of that liability. Currently, $16,366,000. So, it is with that we are proposing this specific OPEB funding. You've also heard from the region what they are proposing. Additionally, Mrs. Hunter was very articulate in the fact that we looked carefully at a number of other items that we have not voted on yet, but we will most likely not move forward after our vote, after upcoming votes that we'll either take on Thursday or next Thursday. As Mrs. Hunter pointed out, we have tried to do a deep dive into the due diligence on your behalf. Revenue is another name for your tax dollars. We are going to take considerable time, a lot of effort, and we will be as diligent as we have to be spending any of your money. We will also work as hard as we possibly can to manage and be good stewards of this. That graph that you saw in line 3 is directly reflective of the management of the town. It really presents a very strong picture. With that, I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you. If anybody has any comments on Article 26, will you please come to the microphone?
Chair Clark again. This is both with regard to Article 26, because I held it off when the Dover-Sherburne budget was proposed. There are two major driving forces behind that increasing liability. One is the increasing costs of medical insurance that is being paid for in the future by the town for the retired teachers. The other is the increasing life expectancy. We see the same problem in pension and health care plans amongst unions. My question, therefore, is more toward the Warrant Committee. Since 1986, Massachusetts teachers have been obligated to pay into Medicare insurance. At Boston University, those of us who retired, as well as those of us at MIT who retired, both institutions came to the conclusion they would not continue to fund retiree health insurance because the retirees were covered by Medicare. I understand this is a contractual issue for those who are currently under employment or were previously under employment, but it raises the question of, in the future going forward, is it logical to continue to provide a duplicate health care insurance for employees?
Thank you.
Getting to be a habit. What is the amount that the state recommends for free cash for a town of our size?
Mr. Crowley, excellent question. For a town of our size is a relative question because towns of our size often have stabilization funds that don't go into this formula. So towns of our size have a minimum amount of 5%. We have always sought to be well above the minimum because we do not keep the same type of accounting.
What would that be in terms of a number?
We thought long and hard about that, and the number that we came to, the range that we came to, was no less than 10% and about 17%.
My understanding is it's $6 million. That's the number I've had people tell me about.
It's closer to 7.7.
And that's more than we need, really, over the history of what we've done. I would suggest you return a substantial amount to the taxpayer, and the first number be more than 1, and I'd like it more than 2, in the millions, that is.
Thank you.
Robin Hunter, 32 Cedar Hill Road. Again, as part of this analysis that we've been doing, it sounds great to give $2 million back to taxpayers, and I think we would all appreciate getting money back. But I think what everybody also needs to understand is it's a one-time event. So what happens if your tax bill is $10,000 one year and we give back an amount of free cash that reduces your tax bill by $2,000? So in the year we make the adjustment, it's $8,000, and going forward, you're back up at the $10,000. So I don't disagree. I think we really need to look long and hard at our free cash balance. We also have to look long and hard at our liabilities, because those liabilities have been earned over the last 30 years, and we, the citizens of Dover, are responsible to fund those.
Thank you.
Bonnie.
Bonnie Akins, Greystone Road. As you may remember, I've talked at the end of the last 2 town meetings, so I was very happy to be on this free cash committee. I am fully in favor of whatever amount we can put up against OPEB. There is no question it has been spent by us for all these years, and that is a liability that I agree with. In terms of putting money aside for future capital expenses, we paid for the schools. If it needs a new roof, borrow big money for a new roof, and those who use the roof pay for it going forward. That's a huge expense. We should not be putting money away for new roofs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments on Article 26? No? Okay, thanks, John.
Great, thank you.
So that was the end of our open hearing for tonight. I want to thank everyone on behalf of the Warrant Committee, the sponsors, the the commenters, the attendees, everyone who's worked so hard to put this together, and we look forward to seeing you at town meeting on May 6th. That is a good question for Jim, because Jim makes all the decisions in the town meeting, yeah.
Denise, look at you pull the rope. Right, you were talking about a special.
He's a good neighbor.